Hey, everybody. Welcome to Text Request Talks, where we have conversations with business leaders about how they make things happen. Presented by Text Request, the business text messaging platform that lets you text from your office phone numbers directly on your computer or any other device so you can stop making phone calls and start actually getting responses. Learn more at textrequest.com. I'm Kenneth Burke, and today, a great guest we have with us is Aaron Harper, who's the CEO of Rolling Suds. Aaron, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Kenneth, for having me. I appreciate it.
So give us the high level. What does Rolling Suds do?
um, we're a residential and commercial power washing franchise. All we focus on is residential and commercial power washing. That's our niche. We do that one thing and we do it better than anyone else. Um, and I acquired the franchise rights to the business in January of last year. So I am not a power washer. I am a franchisor, which is, I think, cool.
So first question, really, why of all the things you could go into business for, even as a franchise, why this? What stood out for this?
So I analyzed 24 different businesses to franchise. So I looked at plumbing and HVAC and electrical and epoxy coatings and tree care and lawn care and insulation. And really there was like things I was looking for um, in a business, and it had to check a certain amount of boxes. And so things that were non-negotiables for me in a business were a fragmented industry. The majority of the power washing industry is the person who power washes, so it checks that box. Recession resistant. So this is a 34-year-old business, so checks that box. Um, Total addressable market being really large. So we do both residential and commercial customers, and we're truly built for commercial, so it checks that box. Unskilled labor, that was very important to me, based on the last brand that I was involved in. So you can teach anyone who has a good attitude and hands how to power wash. So that checks that box. And then scalable and high margins. Those are two probably pretty obvious ones, but for Rolling Suds, it's just adding more trucks within a territory. And then the margins are very healthy. Two things that I couldn't find anywhere else other than Rolling Suds on my list, which were nice to haves on my list, not need to haves, because as you'll see, they're very hard to find. One is a difference in product offering. So a product that is superior and better. Um, so there is a moat essentially to cross. Our founders have figured out a better way to power wash over the last 34 years. And we build the trucks ourselves. We create the equipment, and you can't buy the equipment anywhere else other than us. This process allows us to power wash 5 stories from the ground. It also allows us to do a 3,000 square foot house in 25 minutes or less. So that's insane. Power washers normally take 3 hours or longer for a 3,000 square foot house. So we have a competitive advantage there. The other thing that I was looking for that I wasn't able to find anywhere else was little to no competition in the franchise space. I know a lot of your listeners are either franchisees or franchisors or franchise professionals. Typically, there is kind of an 800-pound gorilla in an industry, and then there's people that kind of copycat, right? And so in any brand that I looked at, there were 5 to 10 other franchise brands, in addition to local guys, all coexisting in a market together. When I looked at power washing, that didn't exist. There was only local guys. There are franchises that offer power washing, but it is a fraction of what they do. Maybe they're exterior cleaners, maybe they're cleaning companies, maybe they're, painting companies, or the holiday lights. Like there was no Serve Pro of power washing. There was no Stanley Steamer of power washing. So I saw an opportunity to become that. Very similar to what 1-800 Got Junk did to the junk business in the early 2000s, we're doing to the power washing industry now. So those are some of the reasons why I chose Rolling Suds.
What were you doing beforehand? I guess what was the mentality for you to want to look for something that checked all of those boxes?
Yeah. So I've worked in franchising for years as an employee on the franchise development side of things. So worked at a carpet cleaning franchise, helped build that to be the largest brand in the world in carpet cleaning. That got acquired by um, uh, the biggest restoration company in the world. Then they wanted to get into franchising. They acquired a brand that was a drywall repair brand. I got involved in that brand in COVID, helped turn it around from needing some help, needing some infrastructure built, and we then built that infrastructure, put the right teams in place, and in two years, I added 223 units to that system, and we built the biggest drywall repair company in the world. And all those franchisees opened, and they opened with jobs on the calendar and full-time labor hired prior to going to training. So that's when I started getting involved kind of more on a thought leadership level at different franchise conferences. I lead discussions or be on panels. I gave a keynote speech recently for the International Franchise Association at the Emerging Franchisor Conference last year, and have just gotten really involved in the franchise community as a whole. Company I worked for, we had grown them to 12 brands, and they were buying a 13th brand, and they were like, "We want you to run it. It's not a franchise yet. We want you to turn it into a franchise." And I was like, "Wait a minute, I can do this on my own." So I raised capital from people like David Barr and Brad Fishman, who many of the people who are in the franchise industry know those names, who could provide mentorship in addition to capital, and looked at a bunch of different businesses, met the founders of Rolling Suds at the end of 2022, and acquired the franchise rights to the business last year. We've been super selective on who comes in. We've turned away 58 people who had the capital and were not right for our system. We've now signed up 51 franchisees who've purchased 187 territories in 26 states. I have a team of 25 people that work for me. The franchisees who have launched with 2 full-time employees hired, 2 trucks on the road, a sales vehicle and a working vehicle, and a location secured with jobs on the calendar. So really proud of what we're building. Yeah, so that's it.
Obviously, this business is good, and obviously, just from what you've said, you're pretty good at this. You've done this with multiple
Thanks.
brands. Do you have is there kind of a recipe that you follow? I know franchising's so big on process anyway, but what works to actually keep scaling things like this?
So you need to find systems for franchisees to find employees, train them, and lead them. You want to do that sooner rather than later, because a lot of franchisees will buy a business and they buy a job. And that's not the way you want a franchisee to grow a business. They're leaving a job, so they don't own a job. Um, so that's really important. And then building robust customer acquisition strategies for franchisees is also really important. So we do both residential and commercial. We have an inbound lead generation strategy that generates leads to the call center on the residential side. We also have an outbound lead generation strategy that generates warm leads on the commercial side for franchisees. And all of that is centralized in what's called the Rolling Suds Lead Center. And this is something that we provide franchisees as part of their program. And so we manage all of their spend, we manage the vendors, suppliers, and that allows them to go focus on growing their business versus um, versus trying to do all this stuff on their own. So I think those are 2 pieces of the puzzle. There's a lot of pieces of the puzzle. You need the right team in place. You need to have the right amount of capital. You need to know how to sell franchises. You need to know how to choose suppliers, vet them, hold them accountable. You need to know how to write an FDD, that is franchise disclosure document, that is fair while still protecting the brand. I mean, I joke, but like building a franchise system is like open heart surgery. There's so many things that can go wrong. So
I want to dive deeper into the lead generation portion of it. So if you handle all of that in-house from the corporate level for, you said 51 franchisees, I believe 187 territories. What are you doing to get that lead flow going, and how do you make it work for each territory? Did the same things work across the board? Do you have to change it up from area to area?
so
Or just talk me through that.
we have multiple different vendors, so we're not reliant upon like 1 or 2 vendors. We have multiple vendors that work better in some markets than others. But part of what we do is we manage their spend for them, so that they just know that they have this amount of allocated capital while we do the learning. Because every marketing strategy, no matter no matter how good it is, there's still learning phases that go into where you're going to out. And that's one of the biggest scary things when you start a business is like, where do I allocate my capital? And you can, with the wrong marketing companies, burn a lot of cash. And so we just work with specific vendors that I have had relationships with in the past or that our founders have had relationships with to help them grow their business. And we have, supplier agreements with them. And those agreements have some teeth, which is one of the benefits of a franchise is you get leverage that you wouldn't otherwise have. Um, and we're not perfect, but it takes it off of the franchisee's plate, and it's better than what a franchisee would have to figure out on their own. Um, and This allows the franchisees to go out and do the thing that's going to drive the business forward the most, which is be in their community, shaking hands at BNIs, kids sponsoring kids soccer games, going, different things like that.
So then, because I'm a marketer, so I love to geek out on this a little bit. Are there particular channels that stand out, like Facebook ads in particular, or Google search and online reviews, or is it kind of this cornucopia of things that work together?
It is a cornucopia of things. There's no one silver bullet. Every marketer or every franchisee wants the one silver bullet. Like, can I just pay $1,000 and get $10,000 in revenue? Um, it is a mixture of different companies that have different sets of skills, and sometimes they don't work in certain markets, and sometimes they do. But the cool thing about what we do is we manage those relationships rather than what a lot of franchisors do is they're just like, here's your three marketing vendors. These are the ones you can use. Go set up your budget and you deal with them. There's a lot of risk that you run there because franchisees could have a pretty bad experience with that company or they could spend money and it could not return. So we kind of do a hybrid of managing the vendors, but also managing their spend so that it kind of takes it off their plate, um, which is really one of the biggest reasons why people decide to franchise a business is because we have those types of relationships and those types of things. Yeah.
What are you doing to bring in new franchisees? Is it, and I guess, are you primarily bringing on people who are new to franchise ownership or new to business ownership, or are these typically people who have owned other brands and they're expanding their portfolios?
We're all over the place in terms of like we've brought in people who ran other people's businesses, or they ran business units in larger companies, or they um, have managed teams, or they have complementary businesses, or they've had multiple exits, or they're a professional poker player. I mean, like literally, like we've brought in franchisees operating at a really high level. We just signed up the largest Fast Signs franchisee. Him and his partners do 42 million a year. Signed up another gentleman who had a $135 million exit after raising $20 million and built a SaaS company in 4 years. So like we're bringing in some operators that like I didn't think that we would attract. Like none of the brands I've been involved in ever attracted the type of operators that we've signed up. So I would say the common thread and common theme is they're really high level thinkers that that want to grow big businesses, but don't have this illusion that they can like not work or not be involved in the day to day of growing the business. Now, our franchisees are not power washing. They have a general manager in training and a junior technician hired prior to going to training, but they are in their community shaking hands and kissing babies until they get enough revenue to be able to step out of that. And or they have an operating partner who's a partner in the business who's doing that part for them. And I think that's also a really important note. Like the guy who has a $42 million fast signs business, like he's got an operating partner who owns a significant portion or owns or has the opportunity to own a significant portion of the company. But those are all things that are really important, I think, when you're growing a big business.
Is there any particular learning curve that you see over and over again with new franchisees, or they come in with an impression of how things should be, and then it totally is go sideways from that?
So I think I think in general, what I've seen over the years is franchisees uh, they buy into a brand, right? Because of all the systems. And when they launch, they're spending a ton of money and no money's coming in. And so they are like, wait, where's all the money going? And I need to like piece it all together. But ultimately, like that's not the highest leverage thing for the franchisee to do, but it gives them kind of this illusion of control. Whereas best franchisees that I've ever seen are like, just tell me where to put the money, tell me how much money I got to spend on marketing, like, and they're just comfortable just doing whatever they got to do, and they just focus on execution. And so, but I don't think this isn't like Rolling Suds specific. You know what I mean? Like this is just franchising in general. When you launch, I joke, when I started this business, I didn't have an income. I had an outcome. It just went out. It didn't go in. And that's a scary place for anyone to start. And so we require franchisees have minimum of $300,000 in either liquid or liquidatable assets. And the purpose of that, one of the biggest reasons is so that we're not cash strapped trying to grow a big business. Like you can't, invest $100,000 only and grow this massive business. Like it costs money to buy trucks and buy territories and, open and get locations. And so we're really high capital requirements, but that allows us to attract a certain type of operator.
Switching gears a little bit, you said you've got a team of 25. Did I hear
Mhm.
that right? Okay.
Yeah.
So as a leader, how do you figure out what work you need to pass off to somebody else or delegate and what task you need to do yourself?
So I try to think as a leader, what are the things that only I can do? And what are the things that like I can that so like I'm the only one who can do what you and I are doing right now, right? I'm the only one who can create content about um, the things that I know about franchising, right? Um, for a while, I did all of the sales myself up until about 3 weeks ago, and sales, franchise development. So I did it all. Um, I felt like that was important because if you're buying into a brand and there's no data and there's no franchisees, a lot of it is you're buying into the leadership team and the vision of what we're trying to accomplish. And so now at 187 locations, that's now something I can hire for. And so I just try to think of what are the things that I can do and no one else can do, and how do I spend my time doing those things?
You had some key criteria for who you want as a franchisee. Does the same apply to the people you hire for your own team, or is it a little bit different? What do you look for?
So whenever you grow a company at like, you know, that rate, what I found is that the individuals have to be able to also grow at that rate, both personally and professionally. And if they're not, it's holding the company back. And so when I'm deciding who to bring in, I'm thinking, can can this person keep up? And and if they can't, that's okay, right? Like growing a startup at a rapid rate um is not for everyone. There's long nights sometimes, there's weekend work, there's we're in startup mode. And so I'm looking really for, does this person have the grit to get through the hard times, which is also what I'm looking at for a franchisee. There's definitely overlap. I'm also looking for people that kind of have a lot to prove still, if that makes sense. Um, like they've got a long career ahead of them and they want to really show what they're capable of doing. Um, and that's worked really well for us and for our culture.
Somebody who's smart and has a chip on their shoulder and kind. That combo goes a long, long way.
Like a lot of the franchisees and the employees that I brought in have a very similar background to me. Like they were making other people a lot of money. They were really good at the things that they were doing, but they didn't have an opportunity to really impact change or have ownership in the way that either employees or franchisees are able to do. So there's definitely some like you get what you put out there kind of stuff going on. And I think that's why we've attracted some of these higher level operators because they think like me.
Speaking of needing people who can grow at that rapid rate as the company grows, I imagine that applies to you as well. I'm sure you're not done growing and learning, and so I'm curious, where do you go to keep learning and growing and pushing yourself?
So part of my personal mission is to make franchising a little bit more mainstream. So like a lot of people outside the franchise industry, I won't say everyone, but the general theme that I've seen is they either think it's fast food, they think it's a scam, or they have absolutely no idea what it is. And all three of those are not okay options for me. Like as I go into this next generation of franchisors, and I'm part of kind of helping lead that. Um, I want uh, I want people to out in other business communities to know that franchising is this great business path and this great model if done correctly. And so I'm all about professional development. Um, and paying for that is investing in yourself. I invest I invest in my leadership team to either go to conferences for their own professional development, be part of masterminds, come with me to conferences. Like there's a ton of stuff that I do. And so when I think through like how do we accomplish that larger mission, it's by accessing these larger communities. And I do that through content, and I do that through attaching myself to other content leaders in other industries. And so I was recently featured in the newsletter for Cody Sanchez. If you follow Cody Sanchez, um, so they did a feature of me in and Rolling Suds in her newsletter, which went out to 500,000 people. I'm
That'll get
in
your franchisees.
That's yeah, for sure. That and then I was featured in the Entrepreneur magazine with the new issue that just went out for May, June, and wrote a 3,000 word piece on responsible franchising. And that went out to millions of people, right? So like how do we get franchising and franchising done the right way in front of the most amount of people possible so that it can kind of come out of this like corner that we've kind of all operated in for a long time, and how can we bring in other leaders from other industries that can really transform the franchise industry as a whole.
You might have just covered it. My last question for you was going to be, what's one thing you want to leave people with, or what's one recommendation you want to give to everybody? Would you just reiterate that, or what would you say?
Yeah, yeah, just franchising is an incredible opportunity for people to build wealth, and I do not think there's a quicker and safer way to wealth generation than finding the right brand. Unfortunately, that is not the perception that a lot of the general public has. And so if we're able to do what I'm talking about at scale, and we're going to do that by building an audience and giving away everything I know about franchising for free, then we can have a bigger impact.
Perfect. Aaron, I've really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you for sharing all of your expertise with us.
Me too. Thanks, Kenneth, for having me on.